depend upon you in this nation for all things, and we speak blessings and divine favor, open doors, in the name that is above every name. And let everyone say amen. Amen. Let's repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Blessings. Have a great day.
Thank you, Reverend Eileen. Good morning, honorable senators. When we last met, we were at the first reading of a bill. The following bill was read a first time and table, a bill for an act for the designation of specified commercial enterprises and specified commercial economic zones in the Bahamas. Are there any further first reading of bills?
Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House and to move for first reading of a bill for an act to amend the International Tax Cooperation Act. If I may obtain a second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the International Tax Cooperation Act. As many are in favor of the bill being read a first time would say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill be read a first time. Further first readings?
Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a bill for an act to amend the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Act, to strengthen compliance and enforcement with respect to the Common Reporting Standard, to reflect the Bahamas' adoption of the multilateral approach to the automatic exchange of financial account information, to facilitate the Bahamas' accession to and compliance with the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters and for connected matters. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time. Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Amendment Bill 2017. As many are in favor of the bill being read a first time would say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill will be read a first time. Are there any further first readings?
No further first readings, Madam President.
Second reading and committal of bills?
Madam President?
Sorry.
Oh, credit. Wait. Do we share the credit reporting bill? You did? Oh, you have it now? No, okay. We'll give notice. Can I just give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, we'll also have some further bills to table.
Thank you, the chair. Further. Go ahead.
Thank you. Madam President, I stand and rise to move for the second reading and committal of the Commercial Enterprises Bill 2017. As I do so, I must observe that the debate in social circles has, in my view, been reduced to an exercise in race baiting, the stirring up of xenophobic and irrational fears, and scaremongering by some elements in the opposition. Snide comments such as the labeling of the bill as Brent's bill being an obvious reference to the Minister of Immigration and former Deputy Prime Minister Brent Simonet, are erroneous, inaccurate, harmful, and redolent of vicious race baiting. The fact that Minister Simonet is the son of the premier of the last minority-led government in this country is not a circumstance that was in his control. Through his adult life, Minister Simonet has shown a commitment to public service and the advancement of the Bahamian people, which is to be commended. In his business and professional life, his many investments and support for national objectives, Minister Simonet has always shown first and foremost a love for this country and its many and diverse peoples. Similarly, Madam President, the scaremongering by the Leader of the Opposition and his threat to potential investors and Bahamians who might take advantage of the provisions of this bill once enacted is equally to be deplored. I see that my good friend opposite has himself forecast that the country will be flooded with foreigners. Yes, well, okay. Okay, yes. Okay. Well, so long as those words didn't come out of your mouth, that'll be fine. Well, whatever you say, you should admit to saying. Okay. I'm sure that whatever the member opposite said, he will say here as well. Both of these responses, race baiting, scaremongering, these are tired old PLP tactics that have always been used in every instance against any meaningful FNM initiative. You know, many of us remember the obvious race baiting of the airing of the Roots miniseries the week before several general elections in the 1980s. 1982, 1987. Week before the election, bam! We well remember PLP election slogans such as "No turning back." We need only remember the naked threat by Paul Adderley made to Saul Kersner, the investor who brought us the Atlantis Hotel in 1993, which Mr. Adderley himself said had been done with the full consent, knowledge, and participation of the then leadership of the PLP. We remember the PLP threats to remove and repeal Sunday shopping laws, the PLP threats to repeal the International Persons Land Holdings Act, and the PLP threats to repeal the 2000 laws which reformed the Bahamas' financial services sector. In each of these instances, the PLP were merely making empty threats. In each case, the PLP, when elected with their usual appeals to race and xenophobia, scaremongering, the PLP immediately abandoned any pretense of opposition to to FNM laws, and they warmly embraced every last one of them, every one. So I urge Bahamians to remember this sordid past of the PLP. The fact that they say one thing in opposition and do entirely another thing in government. And to judge their vitriol and their tactics now on this initiative. It's just a lot of words. It's just a lot of scaremongering, feeding and stirring up irrational fears in the hearts and minds of Bahamians. And if they are ever given the reins of government again, they'll warmly embrace this commercial enterprise bill as they have every other FNM initiative. In a few weeks, Madam President, and just before the Christmas holidays, this government will take a bold step to carry out a campaign promise to repeal and replace the destructive and harmful so-called Grand Bahama Port Area Investment Incentives Act, which was passed by the PLP. It is an act which is probably the worst and most ineffective law ever passed by a parliament in an independent Bahamas. It was an act that was stillborn at birth. It had to be immediately amended to add a whole host of subsidiary companies owned by the Port Authority and to grant them total exemption from the provisions of that act. It is an act which immediately after that again had to be amended by passing a bill to delay the implementation of the new mandate that every licensee of the port, Bahamian, non-Bahamian, partnership, homeowner, every licensee had to apply to the ministry in Grand Bahama to get exemption from the act. And the PLP had to come back and immediately delay that for 6 months. And every 6 months after that, they had to come back and delay it for another 6 months, and another 6 months, and another 6 months. We're talking about the PLP's law and what this government is going to do. And this government is going, Madam President, I would ask for the protection of this, of your chair, okay? You could stand up and formally do what you want to do.
Well, let me just,
I am
may
talking
I
about-
interrupt? May I interrupt at this point? What we're going to do today is we're going to allow, and I will give some leeway, and all senators will be given the same leeway. I will allow the senator to continue. Please, if there are any issues you have, we're going to think about. This is very, as far as I'm concerned, this is a very important bill. The public wants to hear the views of the Senate, and I would like senators to be able to make their contributions. And unless it is something egregious, we're going to allow senators to make their contributions. And at the end of the contributions, I will allow senators, if there's some strong things they need to clarify. Okay?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, just to deal with the unmade point of order, we are speaking, when I speak about the Grand Bahama Port Area Investment Incentive Act and what the government intends to do about it, this is directly relevant to the debate for two reasons. The first reason it is directly relevant is that we opposed the Grand Bahama bill passed by the PLP in the House and in the Senate. And we told the Bahamian people that when we came to office, we would repeal it. We meant what we said, and we did, and we are going to do what we said. Let me put it another way. We said what we meant, and we meant what we said, and we're going to do it. The second relevance of this, to that issue, to this, and that goes to, that first point, goes to the PLP tactics of throwing all kinds of everything at whatever the F&M does and saying they're going to repeal it, and they come right in and they embrace it. That's just to show the difference between serious opposition and opposition that does what the PLP does. The second thing is that this bill is directly connected because when the government, this government, passes our Grand Bahama bill, it will restore all of the incentives and exemptions that are in the original Hawksbill Creek Agreement for all licensees of the port for 20 years, thereby being another plank in the strategy overall of the government to try and restart the Bahamian economy and to stimulate it and to get out of the stagnation which the PLP had this country in for 5 solid years. The numbers are clear that for the last 5 years under the PLP, from 2012 to 2017, the Bahamian economy experienced zero growth. Let me give an overview now of the bill. If it was left in the wheelchair by the FNM, it was left on the operating table by the PLP. We are going to fix this economy. We are taking steps to do creative things, to take the Bahamian economy up to new heights. And I'm doing so. Repartee. Little repartee.
We will. Done.
I'll give a short overview of the bill. The Commercial Enterprise Bill is intended to address the decline evidenced in the financial services sector of our economy over the past 20 years. As the world's attention through the OECD has fastened on the prevention of the abuse of the financial sector by money launderers and terrorist financiers, coupled with the open assault upon bank secrecy itself by the European Union, with the tacit support of the United States, and even now the standalone American legislation called FATCA. The fact is there has been a consequential loss of banks offering the staple business, which has for so many decades comprised the bulk of our financial services sector, namely private banking. Private banks have left the Bahamas, closed, gone into liquidation. It is an unfortunate reality, and jobs have been lost. It is an unfortunate reality that much of private banking appears to have been very sensitive to tax scrutiny. And with increased demands for tax transparency, there has been a consequential loss of such business. Hundreds of good-paying jobs have been lost as private banks have either closed or been relocated to their home jurisdictions. The losses of banking institutions have resulted in a harsh reality, namely that the contribution of the financial services sector to our gross domestic product in the form of salaries, building of buildings, rental of office spaces, taxes, and so forth. The contribution of that sector to the Bahamian economy has fallen from 20% to a mere 3% of gross domestic product. And Madam President, the jobs lost have disproportionately affected single women, mothers, informally high-paying jobs who have been thrown onto the unemployment lines. Let me take a few moments to speak to the vital importance of the financial services sector to our economy and the well-being of every Bahamian. You know, if we just listen to the noise in the market, we would just simply, as the noise in the market does, it just dismisses the whole sector as a bunch of foreign bankers who don't really add anything to our economy, who bring in a lot of other foreigners who do jobs that Bahamians can do. This is the noise in the market. But this is a false and self-serving fallacy. We've lost a lot of banking jobs over the last 20 years. I don't see when these foreigners go, I don't see Bahamians standing up and taking their places and opening their own offshore banks to replace the jobs. These jobs that is said by people in the noise in the marketplace and members opposite. Okay? The fact of the matter is, Madam President, that when the jobs have been lost, they have not been replaced by Bahamian initiative or investment. That is the reality. It's sad, and I wish it were different. Let's also look at another fallacy, that the banks, such as they are, and that the financial sector doesn't really do anything for Bahamians, because that's what is suggested out there. Firstly, no Bahamians have set up any offshore banks. Jobs, in the absence of Bahamian offshore banks, are dependent on the investments of foreigners. So what these jobs do as a result of these investments, these foreign investments, is to provide jobs for Bahamians that Bahamians have not taken up the challenge of providing for our own. Secondly, what they do is they provide valuable foreign currency inflows. Let's look at it. Our dollar is pegged to the United States dollar, 1 for 1, which means when an American tourist comes here to the Bahamas and he wants to buy a straw basket that is worth $15, he take out his American $15, 10 and 5, pays that to the vendor. He doesn't say, my dollar is worth twice as much as yours, I'm only going to pay you $7.50 US dollars. Dollar for dollar. Yes, it is. It is not legal tender, but there is an exemption in the regulations to allow for Bahamian as well as banks to accept in exchange, and the law requires that they give Bahamian dollars in exchange to Bahamians, and they can give US dollars in exchange to US persons. That's what the law requires. Okay, so the point is, though, what these jobs do that are in the sector is for Bahamians is they provide valuable foreign currency inflows to the economy. That US dollar inflow into our economy then goes immediately into the foreign reserve holdings of the Central Bank of the Bahamas. And because the central bank is able to show in any given budgetary reporting period that it has enough US dollars to pay for 3 months of non-oil imports, that is the standard by which the valuation of the Bahamian dollar is assured as being pegged 1-to-1 with the US dollar. And for that to be maintained, foreign currency reserves in the central bank must cover 3 months of non-oil imports. So every dollar brought into this economy, whether from a cruise ship passenger, a stopover visitor, or an offshore banker, is critically necessary to support our foreign reserves and to support the quality of life of Bahamians. So these banks conduct their business in foreign currencies, usually offshore, trading in markets, performing services. Then when they come to pay salaries, pay their office rent, pay their house rent, or buy homes, those dollars are converted immediately upon bringing them into Bahamian dollars, because you can't pay your staff in US dollars. You pay your Bahamian staff in Bahamian dollars. And so once again, you see it's discrete. You don't see the money changing from US to Bahamian, but it happens every day. And these hundreds of thousands of transactions are putting US dollars into the central bank and supporting the way of life of every Bahamian, not only those who are actually employed in the banks, but little Mary and little Johnny's mummy is able to have dollar for dollar. If she wants to go to Miami to buy some, let's say, school supplies, that dollar is worth a US dollar. That's the importance of it. So, there are open ways in which you see the benefit by employment and skills transfer, and then there are discrete ways by the transactions necessary to run the operation, which are in Bahamian, which are translated from US dollars into Bahamian dollars. And that is why the financial sector is so vitally important. All salaries, rentals, and purchases are converted from US to Bahamian dollars. I did that wrong way here. From US to Bahamian dollars. These US dollars sold by the offshore banks to commercial banks pay for salaries and end up in the central bank. This means that whenever you want to buy foreign currency for travel or for trading purposes, there's dollar for dollar, except for the exchange control costs. The importance of the financial sector is that it provides not only high-paying jobs, but also valuable currency, which adds to our reserves and strengthens the Bahamian dollar, while avoiding devaluation of our dollar. Financial services sector has, as I said, had to face many changes over the last 20 years. It is adapting to the changes, and in many cases, they have developed new and diversified offerings to the marketplace. However, it is clear that it is an infinitely smaller sector of our economy. In an effort to address this loss of business, the Commercial Enterprises Bill was conceived as a way to address the loss of traditional businesses by providing a way to attract new and diversified enterprises to locate, relocate, or be established in the Bahamas, particularly in new and emerging businesses, which are often at the cutting edge of the new technologies. Further, the bill was conceived as a way to re-attract those larger, more labor-intensive, non-tax sensitive financial services which were once to be found in the Bahamas, but which were lost as a result of unfortunate missteps or bad policy decisions of former governments. The most important of these being captive insurance, which was invented in the Bahamas, but which was lost to the Bahamas as a mass employing industry in the early 1970s, when the first PLP administration sought to impose taxes and regulations without consulting the industry. The great advantage of captive insurance is that it hires a lot of people in other competing jurisdictions, and it provides high-paying jobs, especially when coupled with its necessary partner, reinsurance. So captive insurance and reinsurance are necessary partners, and they head up the list of businesses that we are trying to attract back to the Bahamas in that case. Salaries in other jurisdictions in the captive insurance area are very high and can start as high as $60,000 a year. Now, the other business which was lost to the Bahamas is the business of maritime brokerage, which is an incident of maritime trade. Maritime brokers basically perform a simple function. They match empty boats with full shipyards. They put together the transporter with the freight. And these transactions, and as you know, international shipping today is about like mega boats that take mountaintops worth of containers. These transactions can actually net to the brokers significant monies, sometimes in the millions, on one transaction. So this is the kind of business. There are Bahamians who are working in maritime brokerage outside of the Bahamas, but not in the Bahamas. But we want these Bahamians to come back and to have the incentives and to have the ability to bring that kind of bulk business to the Bahamas. We would dearly love, we all complain about the brain drain. We would dearly love to see our brothers and sisters Bahamians come back home and bring that business with them. Additionally, the bill provides a list of targeted business enterprises, some of which relate directly to our traditional businesses that we've lost, such as captive insurance, but also businesses that we're trying to get started in Freeport, such as assembly of manufactured goods. This was once a part of the dream of Freeport. And brokerage. But the majority of these items set out in the bill, and I will read them, aim where they diverge from previous attempts at giving exemptions in Bahamian law, and I will show something very important, that virtually every business item mentioned in the schedule to the Commercial Enterprises Bill is already advertised by the Bahamas on the government's website and its national economic policy as being areas targeted for foreign investment. Already. And where there are differences, it is our attempt in this bill to attract persons engaged in the new and emerging international businesses and technology development that are largely computer and internet-based, such as biometrics and analytics, such as nanotechnologies, all of these things. that are going on, the new and emerging businesses we're trying to reach into the market. That's mine, and I'm using that. I need to use that. Yeah. These businesses are not capital intensive, and they're not in the Bahamas. They are technology intensive, requiring only very powerful computing capacity, equipment, and a reliable internet connection. For such internet-based enterprises, the reality is, and I want to reaffirm and let Bahamian people know, the Bahamas has a distinct competitive advantage over the rest of this whole Caribbean region and Central America and Latin America. And I'll tell you why. We have the best, the strongest, and most reliable communications and internet infrastructure of any country anywhere in the Caribbean and Latin America. The investments made by successive governments in laying fiber optic cables linking virtually every island in this country, linking the Bahamas to Haiti, and linking us to the United States by these means place the Bahamas in the best position to grab center stage in the new and emerging internet-based businesses. We are, as they say when you're playing checkers, we are on the bull run. So if we're on the bull run, why are we afraid to take our stand and go after this business? Bring it here and benefit Bahamians. Because the fact is that Bahamians hold high position in a number of Silicon Valley companies and Google and Microsoft, but they're over there acquiring skills and using their skills and using their expertise. They're not here. And what we would like to have, Madam President, is a framework that will be welcoming, that will welcome our Bahamian brothers and sisters to use their capital, their skill, their expertise, whatever it takes to come home. And if they don't want to come home, at least set up a business where you can have business done and hire your brother and sister Bahamians and train them. This is the intent of the bill. It is the intent of the bill. The bill by itself will not do that. The government will, in due course, as soon as this is passed, launch a series of trade missions designed to promote the Bahamas in all of the important markets of the world. It is a tool for development. Madam President, I will now read the list of companies that the bill is seeking and enterprises that the bill is seeking to attract to the Bahamas. Captive insurance, reinsurance, mutual fund administration, arbitration, wealth management, international trade, international arbitrage. That's large volume currency trading deals, if you will, made with the expectation of only earning maybe a 0.1% profit on the margin of difference. But that 0.1% when you're investing $2 billion or $3 billion is hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's what the arbitrage is about. There's wealth management, international trade, international arbitrage, computer programming, and software design and writing, bioinformatics and analytics, maritime trade, nanotechnology, biomedical industries, boutique health facilities, data storage and warehousing, aviation-approved maintenance operations, aviation registration, call centers, manufacturing or assembly of manufactures. Now, I'm just going to jump very quickly to compare this list with the list of undertakings that, according to the investment policy and the government's website, are, and I'm quoting, targeted for foreign investors. Now, that's only, I'm just to show this, and I'm come back to it now. Touristic resorts, upscale condominium timeshares and second home development, marinas, information and data processing. Well, We have here data processing, informatics, and analytics, basically the same concepts. Assembly industries, we have assembly of manufacturers. These, I'm reading here now from a list of things that the Bahamas already proclaims to be areas targeted for foreign investors. And I come to who we are targeting in this bill. The government's website and the National Investment Policy specifically state these things, okay? High-tech services. Well, what do you think we're talking about when we're talking about software design and writing, bioinformatics and analytics, nanotechnology, biomedical industries? Okay, let's go. Ship registration, repair, and other services. Light manufacturing for export. Agro industries, food processing, mariculture, banking, and other financial services. Well, the other financial services are resolving themselves into things like mutual fund administration. Captive insurance. Captive insurance is here. We've added reinsurance. Pharmaceutical manufacture. Offshore medical centers already being sought after. Okay, and wholesale distribution of any product produced locally. So we see, when we compare what this bill says and what the existing platform of incentives being offered to foreign investors, they are basically the same thing, except that this bill captures in greater detail the new and emerging businesses specifically. Members opposite, let me say that, Madam President, the members opposite may well and certainly will, no doubt, oppose this bill based on their notion of how the Bahamianization policy worked. But I respectfully assert that this bill is in full accord with the Bahamianization policy, which Bahamianization policy has always been subject to and has always acknowledged the need for allowing businesses which perform services for which Bahamians are untrained to locate in the Bahamas on favorable terms, to obtain work permits, and also train Bahamians so that over time, Bahamians came to have greater roles even at the highest levels of senior management in these businesses. The Bahamianization policy was crafted to, on the one hand, protect those areas where we are dominant, but on the other hand, acknowledged that we had skills we needed to acquire and provided a framework where, and acknowledged a framework where incentives and tax exemptions would be given to attract these areas to come to the Bahamas, to strengthen Bahamians, to give them jobs, and eventually Bahamians would come to take over senior management positions and eventually even ownership. And the best example of this is the insurance sector. When 40, 50 years ago, Bahamians could maybe be brokers or agents, doing home service, walking from house door to door to collect your little $10 or $15 monthly contribution for your policy, as we call it in those days. But now Bahamians own every major brokerage in this country, brokers and agents, owned by Bahamians. We own also now insurance companies. You see, when you see Bahamas First General, they're like brokers and agents. But you see Summit, well, I'm not sure about Bahamas. I know that if you see Summit Insurance is a Bahamian-owned insurance company. Okay, not just a broker and agent. And I think that Bahamas First is also an insurance company, not just brokers and agents. NUA does brokerage. Nassau Underwriters Agency does brokerage. In other words, through the intelligent application of a Bahamianization policy that is forward-thinking and driven and allows Bahamians to rise with the training and the experience to positions of senior management and from senior management to ownership, First of all, equity participation and then ownership. That is how it works. And so what was once foreign owned becomes Bahamian owned and Bahamian controlled. And you don't even need to worry about putting down in your investment policy that insurance is a protected area. You notice in the list of things that are protected, I don't see insurance. Shall I read what is reserved exclusively for Bahamians right now? Wholesale and retail operations, commission agencies, engaged in import-export trade, so not insurance brokers or agents who are commission agents, real estate and domestic property management agencies, domestic newspapers and magazine publications, domestic advertising and public relations firms, security services, domestic distribution of business supplies, construction companies, personal, cosmetic beauty establishments, shallow water scale fish, crustacean, mollusk and sponge fishing operations, auto and appliance services operations, public transportation, landscaping. Insurance is nowhere mentioned. It don't have to be. It's so strong. Bahamians have developed such capacity, they dominate their market. Bahamians. When 50 years ago, they were just employees, if they were lucky to do home service operation, walking in the hot sun to get $10 from each house for the policy. This is what the intelligent, pro-Bahamian application of incentive-based legislation and the Bahamianization policy can achieve. And this is what we want to achieve with this commercial enterprises bill. The bill will clearly be, if you take away the politics and the political posturing, there'll be some in here today, I'm sure, is entirely consistent with the existing national investment policy of the Bahamas and the Bahamianization policy. In fact, most of the commercial enterprises listed in this bill are already specifically listed as being targeted for foreign investment. But, you know, Madam President, I raise a very serious question at this point. The fact that for decades we have been advertising and promoting the Bahamas as giving exemptions for all of these, basically every single area in this bill, including captive insurance and high-tech services. And yet, our results have not been what any government would have wanted. We've not seen, floods of foreigners come in to take away Bahamian jobs. With all of these incentives being up on the web for 25 years, where are those persons with these jobs? Something is missing. There's something or some things that makes the Bahamas unattractive for investment. And we have to find out each and every one of what they are and tackle each and every one of them in sequence so that by the time as we have finished, we will have recast the whole landscape and made the Bahamas a much more attractive place, a much more attractive place to invest in. So, Madam President, who may apply to establish a business enterprise? Section 3 of the Act, as originally drafted, says very simply, any person might apply to establish a specified commercial enterprise in the Bahamas, and accordingly to set up that enterprise in a special economic zone and receive tax exemptions and incentives. Any person. Now, Madam President, that's what Section 3 said from day one. Okay? It's right here. Now, the words any person means and have always intended to mean Bahamians as well, to include Bahamians. If only because, you know, we Bahamians, we are persons too. And the bill always had this here. This act shall apply to any person who is desirous of establishing a specified commercial enterprise in the Bahamas. So we thought it was clear that any person meant Bahamian, since we are all persons. But it was determined in the House and determined as a matter of policy that we wanted to make it not just clear, pellucidly clear, as some lawyers like to say. And so in the House, the following amendment was moved, that is to what was then clause 4.1. And it now provides a specified commercial enterprise is established by a Bahamian, a non-Bahamian with an investment of not less than $250,000, or a joint venture or partnership between a Bahamian and non-Bahamian. Okay? Now, in order to, the point was, Madam Speaker, that any person, meaning including Bahamians, and now in section 4.1, including Bahamians, could apply. Why would a Bahamian have to apply to the Investments Board? Well, because they would wish to get tax exemptions. And not only get tax exemptions, but hire foreigners. Well, if you want to do that, you could be anything. Even a Bahamian has to do that to get the exemption. Because this structure is that you get the exemption, you are allowed to bring in people on work permit, but you have to have a bargain with the government and do certain things, just as has always been done with any inward investment by Bahamian or foreign that wanted to do these things. When Bahamian built hotels, when the Bahamians built hotels, they got tax exemptions from the government, the same as any foreigner. The same as Kersner and Bahama, Bahamians who built hotels, one of whom was the late Berlin Key, built his hotel right next to to Atlantis and got the same exemptions, but he as a Bahamian had to apply for them. In order to clarify the intention of the government, an amendment was moved to make it clear that a Bahamian may also apply to establish a commercial enterprise operation in a special economic zone. If a Bahamian does, he doesn't have to put any upfront capital. Further, if there's a true joint venture or partnership agreement, better with a partnership agreement, quite frankly, than an informal joint venture, between a Bahamian and a non-Bahamian, there's no upfront capital commitment. It is only where a non-Bahamian makes a solo investment without any Bahamian equity participation that the upfront capital requirement of $250,000 kicks in. Now, some critics have said this is low. They've called it bottom feeding, or worse, prostitution. The question of why the capital requirement was set at $250,000 only is a valid question. I acknowledge that, and I have several good answers. The first, if it has, as has been suggested, the amount should have been at least $500,000 or $700,000 or perhaps several millions up front, then in such case, the proposed investor, based on existing national economic policies, would be fully entitled, after a commitment of a mere $500,000, to apply for and be granted permanent residence. Oh, not just to apply for and be granted permanent residence, to get permanent residence on an accelerated or expedited basis for $500,000. Now, based on the, no. You see, that's a very silly comment, because, and I'll explain why, with all respect. The $500,000 limit applies to a business investment. Therefore, he investing in his business would naturally have received a work permit for it. But in addition, he had the right, has the right today, to immediately apply and be given accelerated consideration for the grant of permanent residence with the right to work in his own business. Based on the criticisms leveled at this bill, it would seem to me the height of bottom feeding to go so far as to grant a non-Bahamian who starts a business the right to permanently reside and live in the Bahamas for the rest of his life for a mere $500,000. This bill talks about an investment of $250,000 for a work permit. Work permit. That's what this bill calls for. But the present policy of several governments is to give away permanent residency for a mere $500,000. Well, you want to talk about bottom feeding? Leave it the way it is. Here's what the investment policy of the Bahamas government proclaims on its website, and I quote, major international investors, targeting major international investors, and owners of residences valued at 500,000 Bahamian dollars or more are given accelerated consideration for their annual or permanent residence applications. So, talk about bottom feeding. The fact is, it doesn't say that anywhere in here. Someone needs to correct the government's website because it was the Hubert. Some technical person, whoever the webmaster is of the website of the government needs to correct this entry because the last Ingram administration between 2007 and 2012 raised the dollar value necessary to achieve any kind of accelerated consideration for residency to $1.5 million now. So this is an erroneous statement because the $500,000 only applies to business holders. But the point I make is this. Under present law, someone who invests $500,000 can get whole permanent residency. And that is not, it does not say without the right to work. It is not so because he is investing in a business. Get it right. Someone invests $500,000 in their business, they get the right to work in it. Now, it sounds to me that to give away permanent residence for $500,000 is long-established bottom feeding. This F&M government did not want the issue of how much the initial capital investment by a foreigner would be to get mixed up with no issue of no permanent residence. No. That ain't on the table. We're not putting residence on the table, so we're not asking them to put money that would put them in the category where they could come around and say, I want to be permanent resident. Spend 20 years here and we might talk about permanent residence. Or 10, whatever it is. Now, the second consideration, this is really very, very important because it may not be as easy for some people who are still in the Stone Age to understand, like members opposite, obviously, because they don't accept it. The fact is that most of the businesses listed in this document here on the high-tech side are computer-based, internet-based. The days of what they'd call in America or Britain bricks and mortar businesses, what we call your cinder block and cement, are drawing quickly to a close. The Amazons and Alibabas of this world have slain major retailers, Toys R Us and Sears, and even Walmart is feeling the pressure caused by computers, a good internet connection, and overnight shipping and home delivery. Apart from the transport aspects, all of these businesses are internet-based. Yes. They are low density, low labor, and low capital investments. Y'all are asking that they are already in the existing investment policy, so get your facts right. Yeah. No, but many of the things here are internet-based. Most of the financial services take place over the internet. They are technology and knowledge-based businesses. Hence, the capital requirements for brokerage services or an analytics business are very low. All that is basically required is some office space with a few desks, a few computer stations, and skilled staff. It's knowledge-based, knowledge-intensive, not capital-intensive. That's where these businesses are going. And so the $250,000 capital requirement is based on a realization that we're seeking to attract knowledge-based, knowledge-intensive, not capital-intensive businesses. We are trying to attract many things, but the core of what we are going after Yes, and we have very successful call centers, and we lost a lot of business in the Bahamas when the call centers and the banks were sent to Trinidad. A lot of people lost jobs over that. Now, what are the application process and safeguards for Bahamians? Under Section 5 of the bill, application is to be made by both the Bahamian applicant, a non-Bahamian applicant, or a Bahamian in a joint venture. All of these persons must apply to the Bahamas Investment Authority if their enterprise is intended to employ non-Bahamians to perform any job or any function. And if they go and set up in a special economic zone, they also have to go because of the tax exemptions that they'll get. Yes, but Bahamians will also have to do that because they want to bring foreigners in. And the same way that Berlin Key applied and got the same exemptions from BIA to build this hotel. Under Section 5 of the bill, application is to be made by these persons. Now, every application must be, and I'm quoting, must be accompanied by a business plan which indicates with specificity the nature of the proposed commercial enterprise, its staffing needs, inclusive of the number of work permits which may be required, and such training and capacity building opportunities as may be agreed to be afforded to Bahamians in respect of positions staffed by work permit holders. So the true price of the work permit for the proposed investor is that Bahamians must be trained to fill the positions of every single work permit holder from day one. Now, I think that just to correct the press, that I didn't say that Bahamians would be trained within a year. They must be in training during that first year. Bahamians have to be hired forthwith as soon as the enterprise starts within that year. And at the end of that year, the true price of the work permit is training and capacity building opportunities which shall be agreed between the BIA and the investor to be afforded to Bahamians in respect of positions staffed by work permit holders. So there must be an agreement as to how many work permit holders there'll be and what training and opportunities you're offering to Bahamians in order for them to take those jobs, because the training is in respect of the work permit holder. The work being performed by the work permit holder. The positions staffed by work permit holders. So the bill is very clear that there's a specific agreement that has to be entered into between the proposed investors and the BIA that relates directly to the training and capacity building of Bahamians to perform the jobs that are proposed to be done by work permit holders. And as soon as that business starts, they must begin that process to comply with the agreement. And after 1 year, if it is found that they have not complied with the
Senators,
agreement,
we do have
then
a senator on the floor, please.
then those who do not comply with a contract have broken it. There is a contract between, and will be a contract, an agreement between the government and the proposed investor for Bahamians to be trained to carry out the jobs of work permit holders. And the assessment point for that will be 1 year. That's the length of the first grant of the certificate, 1 year. Now, by Section 6 of the bill, the BIA, which itself has been accused of being a little slow at times, has been mandated to create a special commercial enterprise facilitation unit in order to give prompt and responsive consideration to every application. Under provisions of Section 7, in order to obtain a work permit, the individuals who are sought can only be an executive or manager or individual with specialized knowledge relating to the enterprise. Thus, it is not any Bahamian, it is not any non-Bahamian who can be employed. It is only managers or specialists who will qualify. And Section 7 further provides that work permits can only be for a specified number of work permits for specified posts. So the fact that it has to be specified serves to re-emphasize that there has to be a specific agreement between the government and the proposed investor, whether the investor is Bahamian, joint venture, or a non-Bahamian, that there will be a specified number of work permits for specified posts, and Bahamians must get the benefit of it. Okay. The Ministry, the Department of Immigration has also been mandated when a person gets a certificate as a result of the agreement with the government, the proposed investor and his senior management can enter the Bahamas freely as tourists, get their passport stamped with the tourist visa, and set up the business. That is what those words mean. And set the business up. Once they do so, they have 30 days to apply to the Department of Immigration. And if the Department of Immigration does not answer them, yes, no, or maybe so, within 14 days, the law provides that they'll be deemed to have been granted a work permit. The work permit is for 3 years, can be renewed for one time only for a further 3 years. The idea is that in 6 years, persons will not be allowed to come back in, and either Bahamians will take that position or they have to bring someone else in. How do we protect Bahamian professionals? The many businesses located in the competing jurisdictions say about the Bahamas, the greatest disincentive to investing in the Bahamas is the inability for their in-house professionals, such as lawyers or accountants, to practice in the Bahamas in their businesses without the approval of professional associations or bodies who jealously protect their rights and guard against foreign infiltration. The intent of the bill is to permit the employment of such in-house professionals within the four walls of the specific business. The bill in Clause 2 clearly limits such in-house professionals to those working within the strict confines of the undertaking of that enterprise and not in competition with professionals and advisors in the open marketplace of the Bahamas. So the bill carves that out entirely. They're not to compete with Bahamians in the Bahamian marketplace. Section 9 of the bill further provides, notwithstanding the issuance of the said certificate, any specialized commercial enterprise, and where required, its employees shall comply with the terms and conditions set by the relevant regulatory agency or professional regulatory body in the Bahamas. Hence, the bill provides 2 layers of protection for the Bahamian people. In conclusion, let me say it was said by Albert Einstein. I have 2 more minutes, or 2 more minutes, right? 2 more minutes, I thought so. It was said by Albert Einstein that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing in the same manner while expecting different results. I have gone through the existing investment policy that's been in place for 25, well, back to independence really, as a reflective of the Bahamianization policy. And I've looked and I've informed members of the list of things that are targeted and have been targeted for decades for foreign investments. And we agree, and we should agree, that most of those have not met with fruition. Well, we have to do things maybe a little differently. Maybe we need to get rid of the delays and inefficiencies that have plagued work permit approvals. Subject to, maybe we also need to get rid of the inefficiency of government bureaucracies. Now, this bill is bold in addressing 2 of those areas. Now, but there do remain other, no, labor certificates are required upon application for any work permit, and they're still required. They are still required as a matter of law. The law doesn't change it. The law does not change it. But I urge all Bahamians who have lost jobs in the banking sector to go to the Department of Labor, register, so that when any application comes in, their names, they'll be in the front of the queue to get jobs. They'll be in the front of the queue. Now, there remain a host of other inefficiencies in the government, in terms of government services, in terms of the way in which VAT and VAT TIN registrations are done, in terms of how do we get business licenses, how they're renewed. There are hosts of inefficiencies and delays. Files are lost. Parts of files are lost. Just a few short words, if I may, with indulgence.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The government intends, in due course, to make some very important announcements of major initiatives which will be launched to greatly improve the ease of doing business, to reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies, and to lighten the load that is on all business persons, from the handyman and the road and verge cleaning small contractor to big businesses and major employers in the domestic economy. This government was elected on a mandate to bring about meaningful and positive changes and improvements in governance and in business development, in safety and in security. Last paragraph. We take our mandate very seriously, and Bahamians can look forward to improvements leading, we hope, to the creation of new job opportunities, new employment, new business ownership, new economic growth and development, new and diversified businesses for all of our Bahamians to benefit from, and for all those Bahamians who can't work in the Bahamas because they can't find the work they're trained for them to come home. Madam President, with those words, I move that the bill now be read a second time in committee. Thank you.
Is there a second? There's some.
Yeah, can I work past that? Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jamal Moss.
Madam President, before
He'll have to
I
he'll
go
have to get-
forward, I just want to take this time to pay my respects to a fallen colleague at the Broadcasting Corporation of Bahamas. Ricky Thompson, who I've known for many years, was a good man, hard worker, and dedicated employee to ZNS. I was surprised by his passing. And, it really struck home to a lot of us who are familiar with ZNS. I had the opportunity, like I said, to work with him. Even on shifts where a lot of people didn't want to work, the midnight to dawn. We were always, we had a good relationship, and he would give me advice on how to do this and how to do that. He would train me in the production area. So I just want to take this time to pay my respects to him, and may he rest in peace. Madam President, as I stand to second this bill, the good book teaches us that in all circumstances, we must give God thanks. That being said, I rise with happiness and gladness in my heart, knowing that this bill we are debating and hopefully approving is going to open doors and opportunities, not just for foreigners, but for Bahamians. This bill is going to give Bahamians who are normally stopped, reviewed with delays, given a hard time, and even discouraged, an opportunity now to be able to establish their businesses, which will help grow the economy and employ Bahamians all over. This action-oriented government is once again rolling out the red carpet for Bahamians who want to be entrepreneurs and innovators so that they will experience a level playing field when it comes to establishing business. Despite the noise in the market from those who just want to create problems, this bill is not just for foreigners, but for all Bahamians who want to get involved. Bahamians will finally be allowed to walk on the red carpet laid out by the people's government and treated fairly, or even better, when it comes to being approved for wanting to invest in their Bahama land. Madam President, this action-driven administration is on the right path to encouraging new untouched markets that are in the billions in revenue around the world to come to our shores, present a specified plan for businesses which will be located in the Bahamas approved by a board that is made up of Bahamians, and if they, the foreigners, feel that they wish to have a partnership with Bahamians, then, Madam President, we will encourage that. The truth is this: the country's financial services industry has lost tremendous grounds, dropping from 20% to maybe 3 to 4%. This is one of the reasons why our economy is stagnant or moving at a snail's pace. To reverse our fall in competitiveness and to retain a vibrant community economy, we will need legislation like the one we are currently considering to get the wheels rolling in the right direction. This, of course, is only one element of much needed structural reform, but it is an important one nonetheless. Madam President, the former administration, who governed this country for 5 years, did little to grow the economy, to create real long-term jobs, or even boost confidence in the economy. Instead, they decided to implement decisions that caused the Bahamas to go from good to bad, from bad to worse, and from worse to worse. To paint this picture like a modern-day Michelangelo, unemployment rose up to historic numbers under their watch. Also, they created a job-killing Grand Bahama incentive bill. Also, on their watch, and for the first time ever, 4 credit rating downgrades within one term, and another one knocking at the doors. But thankfully, the Bahamian people fired them and allowed us to save this country with the help of our God from being downgraded again to junk status. Wake up. Madam President, my reasons for supporting this bill is to help support ideas that will get the economy pulse moving, diversify the economy, and start the process of getting Bahamians to work, whether it is as an employee or as employers. This act is very clear when it comes to persons interested in applying for a certificate to make an investment in the Bahamas, obtaining a limited amount of work permits. This bill reveals itself to be a fair one that will level the playing field for all and giving Bahamians an opportunity to sit in positions where a foreigner usually or normally may be requested for. Madam President, if you read in Section 5.2, it says, and I quote, "Every applicant should be in the prescribed form as shown in the second schedule and accompanied by a business plan which indicates with specificity the nature of the proposed commercial enterprise, its staffing needs, inclusive of the number of work permits which may be required, and such training and capacity building opportunities as may be agreed to be afforded to Bahamians in respect of positions staffed by work permit holders." So in other words, before getting a permit, you must agree to pass on knowledge training to Bahamians, so in the future, Bahamians will replace those work permit holders. It's very clear. The opposition knows this, but they have chosen to play crazy. We have put measures in place to ensure that the certificate being given is for 1 year, meaning that the board comprised of Bahamians will have the responsibility to monitor these investments. You know, I would appreciate if Senator Mitchell would pay attention, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be going out leaving the Senate causing more ruckus with misinformation. If attached conditions are not followed or you start to stray away from it within that year, via the plan or work permits, reasons, well, we have put measures in place for both the board and immigration to have oversight where they can cancel the work permit and plans. According to the Minister of State for Legal Affairs, the Honorable Ellsworth Johnson, on the 22nd of November 2017, he said inside our assembly, they can cancel in the interest of national security. So if you're hurting the environment, they can cancel it. If it's discovered that you're not fitting person or something else, then it can be canceled. If you're not training Bahamians, we can cancel it. The act is very clear. Take time and read. I want Bahamian, Madam President, I have the floor. I have the floor. The act, like I said, is very clear. I want Bahamians to know that we are not going to be locked into something or into anything that is not in the best interest of the Bahamian people. In the Financial Transaction Reporting Act, there are many things we can consider to ensure that there is no corruption, cybercrime or money laundering, all of these things and many more that can be canceled if they stray away from. Madam President, as I have stated earlier, what this action-driven administration is attempting to do is to jumpstart the economy and incrementally create the economic environment our country needs. For example, 1, new jobs, new opportunities, higher salaries, real job security, long-term employment for Bahamian families, like the common man who can proudly put food on the table, and especially our single mothers who are out there working hard to take care of their heartstrings. That's what the government wants to do. We want to create new, lasting career opportunities for Bahamians. Senator Darius, the opposition knows this, but they're playing crazy. Madam President, the fears that are being stirred up by those opposite, claiming that, and I'm going to quote an MP, opposition MP who said this, the government is seeking to assassinate the cherished Bahamianization policies. End quote. And Madam President, I want to put the Bahamas on notice. That's a package lie from the pits of hell. Another has said that this bill is just for foreigners and will open the floodgates for only foreign immigrants. Madam President, if you fall upon these lies, you go crazy. But truth be told, my fellow Bahamians, is that they opposite, don't want people to know that today we have young Bahamians who own insurance companies in the Caymans, restaurants in Miami, and casinos throughout the Caribbean. And they are doing extremely well in economies that are far worse off than ours. We want to bring them and others back here to the Bahamas. In these locations where there are more open investment policies and related immigration policies, these policies have never translated into less economic opportunities for their citizens in those places. In fact, the investment by those Bahamians abroad meant more jobs, tax revenues, and economic activity in those countries. That then means more economic opportunities for their citizens. Thus, what is the basis for the opposition voting against Bahamians? What saddens me as a proud Bahamian is that we have an opposition who claims to believe in Bahamians. Yet, despite all of this information, they oppose it because they don't want the economy to grow, new career opportunities to be created, and Bahamians making good, honest pay through hard work under this administration. I say to them, how do you tell Bahamians who are praying every day and night for a job, not to support something that can provide new employment opportunities? The young father who is eager to take care of his family and put food on the table, how do you tell them not to support this? Even the young single mother who is left to herself with no financial help, how do you tell them not to support this? How do you fix your mouths to rise up and oppose this administration's effort to bring new job opportunities? They're using this as a political football, trying to gain points by a touchdown, field goal, or even a two-point conversion at the expense of voting against my fellow young people's future by muddying up the waters. This is ludicrous and insane. The PLP is voting no to new jobs, new opportunities, new long-term employment, new economic growth, and diversifying the economy. What makes it even worse is the PLP is voting no to jobs that have the potential to pay attractive salaries once everything is executed right and trained, qualified individuals are in place. Like, for example, and these are figures that I got from Google just in case anybody wants to jump up and say, point of order. Software design and writing, which generally pays up to $62,637 a year. Bioinformatics and analytics, $41,740 just to start up, and the highest you can make is up to $110,000. Maritime trade between $64,000 to $100,000 a year. Call centers start at $35,358. The nanotechnology, you can start at $52,000 a year up to $95,000 and up. The data storage for data warehouse specialists ranging from $70,000 to $90,000. Madam President, I might want to take up on this job opportunity. But yet, this is what the PLP party is voting against. They are voting against Bahamians who will be given the opportunity to get out of the streets, be hired, learn the system, be trained, and prove themselves worthy to earn an attractive salary and perhaps be given an opportunity to be selected to lead these enterprises. I ain't come to play no games with them today. We're bringing facts. Bringing facts. Madam President, I realized during their 2002, 2007, and 2012, 2017 terms that the PLP is not concerned about advancing Bahamians, especially young Bahamians, in areas where we could be trained to become competitive, be independent from the political stronghold, lead organizations, help create long-term jobs, and contribute to building and strengthening our economy. Thankfully, I am a part of a government that truly believes in Bahamians and will break all locks, kick down the doors, and remove the red tape that discourage Bahamians from setting up businesses in their own country. We will allow Bahamians to be a part of the game changer movement. You know why? Because it's the people's time. Colleagues, what I also like about this bill is that it will not be just a Nassau-centric bill. This bill we are debating will give family islanders an opportunity to be selected to boost their economy, create jobs, and more money to go into their savings account. Also, this will allow family islanders who are living in Nassau. I want you to listen to this very carefully now. It's very important. Also, this bill will allow family islanders who are living in Nassau to finally have an opportunity to go back home and be a part of something that will boost their local economy. Can you imagine North Andros, South Andros, North Abaco, South Abaco, Noy Lutra, Clay Speaking, you with me? South Lutra, Long Island, Auckland, Crooked Island, Mayaguana, Inagua, and even Grand Bahama benefiting from this? This is beautiful. This is beautiful. But like I said, Clay Sweden, the opposition knows this. But they playing crazy, man. Don't get caught up in that. Yeah, Spanish roads. Mr. Garwin a former Bahamas Chamber of Commerce chairman, said in the Tribune, November 24, 2017, and I quote, what we have in this country is skill shortages in certain key areas. We have a number of very talented Bahamians, but with a population of only 300,000 also, the pool is going to be very limited. There will be a need for trained individuals. Bahamians need to become skilled to take on the roles we are bringing in people at this point in time, as opposed to having this paranoia about who is coming to take advantage in our local economy. We should be the masters of our fate. And when I say fate, I'm talking about F-A-T-E, not F-I-T-H. And stop having this concern and competing with expat staff as a negative thing. It really is an opportunity for Bahamians to demonstrate their abilities. Madam President, This is what I've been saying all day. I tell you, Senator folks, I tell you, the opposition knows this.
You're doing
But they're
quite,
playing crazy.
Senator Jamal, you're doing quite well, but please direct all your comments to the chair.
This is what I've been saying all day. Madam President, I tell you, the opposition knows this, but they're playing crazy. And they're playing crazy at the expense of the Bahamian people just to gain some political points. As a wise man once said,
Leader, would you please
Would you
allow the senator?
thank you. Well, you won't get back, but you know.
Direct
A wise
your
man
comments
once
to the
said
chair.
me- a wise man once said to me, and I quote, a wise man once said to me, and I quote, hypocrisy is a sin in politics. And they, Madam President, have all committed that sin. So before I get riled up and my pressure skyrocket, I will end here and say that I support this initiative by this action-led administration to boost our economy, bring new long-term jobs, attractive pay, start the process of diversifying our economy, as well as improving efficiency in government and giving Bahamians the opportunity to invest in their country. Madam President, for the last time, I support this transformative bill. Do I have a second? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moss. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act for the designation of specified commercial enterprises and specified commercial economic zones in the Bahamas. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Mike Darville.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Madam President, it is with great pride that I rise to make my contribution to a bill for an act for the designation of specific commercial enterprises and economic zones in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Otherwise known as the Brent-Simonet Amendment Act.
Let me say from the onset that this bill ultimately seeks to liberalize the granting of work permits
I can't be big.
to enterprises wishing to establish itself in the Bahamas, which I believe can ultimately disenfranchise young Bahamians, professionals, and the country. Subsequently, Madam President, I echo the voices of my colleagues in the lower house and the thousands of Bahamians throughout this country who do not support this bill, and to state emphatically that if the government insists on passing this bill today in this honorable chamber, I will vote against it, and I encourage all senators around the table to follow suit. Madam President, the Free National Movement passed this Commercial Enterprise Bill 2017 in the lower chamber a few weeks ago, with little or no consultation with the business community and the Bahamian people. This was evident shortly after the chamber did a press conference or press statement that clearly demonstrated that more work needed to be done on this bill in order for them to fully accept its content. Since then, countless Bahamians have expressed strong objection to the bill and its implication to Bahamians for generations to come.
Could you please indicate the rule being in front?
Yeah, that Senator Darwell is misleading the Senate when he said that the chamber was not consulted.
I never said that.
The chamber was consulted. The bill was circulated widely to all of the stakeholders in this community, especially the business community. It was also online for all to see, It was on the government's website for weeks before it came to Parliament.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Darville.
Madam President, the member, my cousin, my good cousin, didn't really listen to what I said. I clearly indicated that the bill was passed a few weeks ago with little or no consultation to the business community and the Bahamian people. That is correct. Because there's so many professional bodies who never saw the bill. And I don't need to belittle the question because this particular, we look forward to engage in further dialogue with the government on these matters.
Number two.
What? Yeah, further dialogue.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, senators.
No.
We have one. Look,
I don't really want to stick to the bill.
Senator Darville,
Yes.
can you just have a seat 1 second? Now, Senator Darville, please give him an opportunity to continue with his presentation. Any clarification that needs to be done, we need to do it at the end because I started out this morning by saying that this bill means quite a bit to a lot of people, and I would like everyone's view, uninterrupted, to be heard. Thank you, Senator Darville.
Thank you so much, Madam President, for protecting me from my cousin. I need protection. I would allow my colleagues to move forward with that, but that is my opinion, and I do not deviate from their facts. Since then, countless Bahamians have expressed strong objection to the bill and its implication for Bahamians for generations to come. As such, this government, once again, finds itself in an embarrassing situation and proves that they are out of touch with the people whose time they say it is. Madam President, the legislative agenda of the government seems not to address any of the pressing issues facing the country, and their policies have become cold, callous, insensitive to the needs of the people whose time it is. Madam President, this debate, despite the strong pushback from the business community and the Bahamian people at large, demonstrates to our country and the world that this administration lacks the leadership and the experience to move this country forward. Sadly, Madam President, after more than 6 months in office, senior members of the cabinet, including the Prime Minister, are still running around like a chicken without a head, while public officers in many ministries are sitting around waiting for directives. But what's worse, Madam President, it seems as if the cabinet, the tail appears to be wagging the dog. Let me finish my discussion. I did not.
PLP playing crazy.
We playing crazy, he said, we playing crazy.
Yeah, where's the example of that?
My questions to members on the side opposite. Do any of you know who's really running the country? Or who is advising this inexperienced cabinet? I know my cousin has the experience. I'm asking for the people, my two cousins. Madam President, we must not be playing games in this honorable place because thousands of Bahamians are counting on us to get it right. Governance in difficult times is serious business. And Bahamians on both sides of the political divide are expressing deep concerns on the capability of this administration to govern effectively, which include in creating and implementing policies that would empower our people and advance our beloved Bahama land. I don't think this particular bill addressed that people's concern. Madam President, the Progressive Liberal Party forewarned the Bahamian people that the various fractions of the Free National Movement who came together in the campaign would use any means necessary to regain the government, but had no plan to actually govern. More than half a year in office, the Free National Movement still hasn't articulated a plan or introduced any meaningful form of legislation that would stimulate our economy and put our people back to work. This bill doesn't put people back to work. This bill is a bill to fast track immigration matters. Madam President, just look at the state of affairs for the island of Grand Bahama since May 2017. With even 5 members of parliament and senators who hold substantive positions, things have gone from bad to worse. Well, you're neutral, Chair. Despite the presence, the government still is blaming the PLP and continues with its political agenda in putting people on the unemployment line without taking into consideration the social ramification of their cold and callous policy positions. But they say it's the people's time. Madam President, I've been told that the Department of Social Service and Urban Renewal on Grand Bahama remains underfunded and paralyzed, unable to address the many social needs in that community. It has also come to my attention that the elderly who under our watch receive food assistance monthly are now only able to get the same assistance every 3 months. But they say it's the people's time. Madam President,
Wow.
making matters worse, daily we're hearing cries from the small man demanding transparency and accountability, which was one of the tenets of this administration's campaign. However, it's obvious by the backlash from this bill, as well as the daily criticism of this administration, persons whose livelihood have been affected by these sudden policy change in governments.
Madam President, please.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel. Can you?
I'm unaware of any change in payments.
What's the point of order, Senator?
Misrepresentation, the honourable member is misrepresenting a fact. I am unaware of any change in the payments schedule from monthly to 3 monthly in respect of the other.
I'm telling you what the people
And
tell me.
I will
Check it out.
get the facts.
Please. Thank you so much, Madam President. I'm only reporting what has been reported to me. And I'm asking the government to clarify these issues for me.
Well, if you, Madam
Okay,
President, please,
no,
please,
no.
please,
Clarify it
please,
for me.
please, Madam
With
President,
facts.
please. It's one thing to make a positive assertion, which is what you did. It is entirely another to raise a concern and ask for it to be clarified. I'm more than happy to take your second statement as your statement, and you wish something clarified, and I'm more than happy to do so, and we'll get the answer for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leader. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your concern because I'm asking on behalf of the people of the island of Grand Bahama. Madam President, since the passing of this bill in the lower chamber and the associated amendments outlined by the leader on the side opposite, I've had the opportunity to speak to young professionals who are part of the various industries outlined in the first schedule of this bill concerning the government's proposed liberalization of work permits for foreign workers who will be employed in these commercial economic zones. Madam President, the question that keeps coming up, who will protect the Bahamian workers? And what would be the regulatory framework necessary to monitor the activities in these zones? Madam President, Freeport Grand Bahama is a free trade zone, which is classified by definition as a type of commercial enterprise zone. My question to the government, after 60 plus years, who is really monitoring the activities of that zone, and where is the regulatory framework necessary to do so? As Minister for Grand Bahama in the former administration, I asked the same questions and could not get meaningful answers. The advice that was given to us by specialists in matters surrounding commercial enterprise zones was the urgent need to establish a body in a government ministry, and the suggestion was the Ministry for Grand Bahama that can bring all government agencies and stakeholders together to create synergies that would fast-track investments while monitoring the activities of the zone to protect companies and Bahamian workers. Madam President, the Grand Bahama Shipyard is a foreign company operating in a commercial enterprise zone on the island of Grand Bahama, and its economic model was built around the premise that the company would have to bring hundreds of workers from around the world to carry out its mandate to repair cruise ships. That was their mandate. Approximately 12 years ago, a structured apprenticeship program was put in place by the management of the shipyard, which trained and employed a dozen young Grand Bahamians over a 4-year period. And Madam President was a part of the mechanism that allowed that apprenticeship program to continue. Although it was a good gesture, many who live in Freeport believe that this small program was insufficient and the government should seek greater participation from the company, because at the rate it will take an additional 20 years for the company to become Bahamianized. For this reason, Madam President, our administration partnered with the executive of the Grand Bahama Shipyard to establish an employment program, which was designed to train and engage 600 Bahamians over a 4-year period. This program would replace expat workers, ensuring participation of young Bahamians in this lucrative industry. Prior to leaving office, Madam President, some 200 Grand Bahamians were trained and employed, which this government funded in partnership with the Grand Bahama Shipyard. But reports coming back to us that this program was shelved a few months ago. And most of the Bahamians trained as riggers, blasters, painters, and scaffolders are no longer employed at the Grand Bahama Shipyard and have subsequently been replaced by expat workers. I raised this question before in this honorable place and got no definitive answer from the side opposite. So I did my work. I spoke to 50 young men and women who future at the shipyard was disrupted and now unemployed because this administration did not continue the Joint Technical and Vocational Program, yet they say it's the people's time. This scenario at the Grand Bahama Shipyard is only one example, and I don't want to dwell on that because the Grand Bahama Shipyard has done some good things in our community. But this is only one example to demonstrate to the government how trained Bahamian workers can easily be displaced by foreign companies operating in commercial enterprise zones, and only reconfirms the fears of many throughout our country that the proposed liberalization of work permits in commercial enterprise zones can disenfranchise trained Bahamian workers. We have examples of it in Grand Bahama. Madam President, we know the story enough and very well on Grand Bahama that many workers who live in this environment every day continue to walk on eggshells in the workplace in fear of losing their jobs. Companies operating in these commercial zones, in my view, would always opt to hire expat workers. I've sat in the chair. Instead of trained Bahamian workers because of the control factor, costs involved, and the constant fear of unionization in their operations. This is a reality. So, Madam President, the Bahamian people must give up huge tax concession in these commercial zones to attract direct foreign investment. But like many developing countries and small island states who operate in these commercial enterprise zones, many eventually become stagnant and the tax burden on the Bahamian purse, while the wealthy landowners in the country benefit from establishing these zones. You know, when you establish the zone, the price of the land goes up. Therefore, Madam President, we must be measured in our approach and outline to the Bahamian people the advantages and disadvantages of establishing commercial enterprise zones. However, the liberalization of work permits, in my view, would go against the Bahamianization policy, the investment policy, and would prove to be counterproductive to Bahamian workers. Another important point that I must note, Madam President, is the fact that the liberalization of work permits in the proposed commercial zones was never outlined in the speech from the throne as part of this administration agenda for economic reform. So my question to the side opposite, why is this such a high priority or part of your legislative agenda? And you mentioned nothing about it in the speech from the throne. Madam President, in the lower chamber, both the official leader of the opposition as well as the deputy leader of the Progressive Liberal Party insisted that this piece of legislation, along with its current amendments, should be withdrawn and sent out for wider consultation with the Bahamian people, professional bodies, and all local industries that could be affected by the liberalization of work permits in these proposed economic zones throughout the country. Madam President, for the sake of accountability and transparency that this administration keep talking about, I ask the government to do the honorable thing and withdraw this bill today until there is further and wider consultation with the Bahamian people. Madam President, history would reflect in 1991, the Progressive Party, led by the father of our nation, the late Honorable Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinland, presented a parliament an act to encourage the establishment, conduct, expansion of commercial enterprises and investment and design commercial enterprise zones throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas by granting of certain exemptions and fiscal incentives to persons engaged in such enterprise and investments. This is nothing new under the sun. This was brought to Parliament in 1991. This act, which I understand is still on the books. My Lord, you ain't do your research. The act is still on the books. But was never brought into force. It was brought into force? Thank you. It didn't work?
They said they can
And you bring it back today?
No, they said they can repeal it.
You bring it back today?
They said you can
The
repeal it.
same act. It's the no, your act is the liberalization of work permits. That's what we call it. It has nothing to do with commercial zone. We had an act in 1991 that dealt with this issue. The Free National Movement did nothing with it. We lost the election. I have no problem. I told you to withdraw the act.
Excuse me, senators,
Get the act. I will not
Senator.
no immigration bill.
Senator
Immigration
Michael
bill.
Darville and Senator Kwesi Thompson.
Immigration
Would
bill.
you please address the chair?
Yes, ma'am.
And stop getting loud over the table, because you are going to cause the president to have to get louder.
No, ma'am.
I don't want to do that.
No, we don't want to see that part.
Please.
We don't want to.
You understand me?
Thank you for protecting me from my colleague in Grand Bahama. Now, I will yield. You have something you want to say? Okay.
Chair
Let me finish, ma'am.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kwesi Thompson
Madam
as the
President.
senator has.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you very much. And Madam President, I only wanted to stand because you had indicated that we were having a back and forward, to apologize to my friend for interrupting him.
Oh, thank you.
Although we disagree,
you don't
I,
need a
I
word.
do not want to interrupt him while he's doing his presentation. So I do apologize to Madam President.
Thank you. Such a gentleman and a scholar, my colleague. Madam President, unlike this bill, the 1991 bill had nothing to do with the liberalization of work permits for foreign nationals operating in these economic zones. And the Progressive Liberal Party went on to debate this piece of legislation, which was later passed in chamber by both sides. I understand that the current Minister of Financial Services, who was the mover of this bill before us today, was part of the Free National Movement parliamentary team a year later, and despite the international pressures facing our country at the time, did nothing with the bill. History is a serious thing, you know, because as we go back and look, we have something on the books right now.
Mention his name. They say that's racist.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
That's race-based.
The member for Finance and the Minister for the Financial Services. Wow. Now that the shoe is on the other foot. Madam President, the Progressive Liberal Party has clearly stated that we would repeal this new bill, when given the opportunity, if it's passed today. Simply because the liberalization and granting of work permits to foreign operators in these commercial zones, which could hamper businesses and employment opportunities for young Bahamian professionals in these specialized zones, the honorable member is calling our position regressive and xenophobic. This is so far from the truth, Madam President, and only prove how hypocritical and out of touch the minister really is with the Bahamian people. Madam President, the Minister of Financial Services either have a short memory or have no shame. I believe the entire cabinet should apologize to the Bahamian people for their arrogance in trying to push this bill down the throat of the Bahamian people.
Shame.
But I have come to realize, Madam President, that a leopard cannot change its spots. And this is typical of the Free National Movement, double talking and backpedaling. Madam President, as a political organization who fully understand the state of the economy and what is necessary to attract direct foreign investments to our shore, the record would reflect that under the leadership of the Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie and Minister of State Kailash Roll, billions of dollars of direct foreign investments were brought to our shore during our term in office. On the contrary, Madam President, this scrap gang, that's what I call y'all, a scrap gang.
Madam President, on a point of order.
Just hold on.
That's what I call everyone.
Just hold on.
Thank you.
I would ask.
Yeah, to be careful.
Yes,
Madam President,
just continue your debate.
The speaker before me, Madam President,
Same thing.
called me mentally challenged.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
He called us
did.
mentally challenged and out of touch with reality. All I called the side opposite is a scrap gang. I didn't personally attack anyone.
Well, hold on a minute. Now, Senator, we decided a long time ago
Yeah.
that when you are debating in this chamber, and this is not just for you, this is for all of us.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's elevate what we're saying. And just because someone else has said something that you thought,
No, I got a little bit intimidated when he said that.
Oh, you were a little
stand to my
intimidated.
feet. I was going to stand to my feet. But I decided to use...
why
my
were you
voice
intimidated, Senator?
Because he literally called us crazy.
No.
No,
Yeah.
man.
But let's not have a
anyhow,
debate over that.
I
But
appreciate
but
that.
I want to remind
I'm
all of
prepared
us.
to move
Let's
on.
remind
I'm
all of
prepared
us
to
though.
move on.
Let's elevate this
On the
debate
contrary,
now.
Madam President, over the last 6 months, we have seen nothing substantial brought to the table or articulated in the public domain in terms of investment. In fact, Madam President, we are learning that under this administration watch, potential investors are complaining about the Bahamas Investment Authority and the fact that there's no real leadership. And since we have left office, things are not happening. I admonish this administration. I said leadership. Leadership. We know what the leadership has changed. I admonish this administration to take the bull by the horn, attract new investors. And if you are not able to do so, at least keep the ones we brought in. Madam President, compared to the bill we are currently debating, the 1991 bill was extensive and well drafted with 5 schedules. The first schedule outlined a region in the Bahamas where commercial enterprise zones would be established. The second schedule addressed the application fees in the various regions. I pick up this bill, I ain't seen none of that. The third and fourth schedule addressed the tax exemptions criteria and the durations of the concessions. Maybe you all need to withdraw this bill and bring the Bahamas Investment Incentive Bill, because it was well drafted and it spoke specifically to what you're trying to accomplish. You're talking around the bill, and every time we look at the bill, we can't see what you're talking about. Madam President, nowhere in the Bahamas Investment Bill, and this is the point that I want to make, in 1991 was the liberalization of work permits or to circumvent the powers of the Director of Immigration and the modification of policies to the Department of Immigration to accommodate these commercial zones was ever mentioned. Madam President, this attempt by the Free National Movement to liberalize work permits to foreigners through the back door by way of these economic zones without further consultation with the Bahamian people is fundamentally wrong. And as a political organization, we support Bahamianization policy and fundamentally oppose the ideas of Bahamians not being able to compete for employment opportunities in key positions in any of these businesses operating in the commercial free trade zones. We oppose it. And this is where the conflict comes. That is why we suggested that you withdraw the bill. Let's go to wider consultation. Look at our bill, look at your bill, and let's come on common ground. Madam President, after reading the objective and reasonings outlined in the Commercial Enterprise Bill 2017, it is clear as crystal that this bill has little or nothing to do with commercial zones and all to do with the liberalization of work permits. That's the fact. Since the passing of this bill in the other place and the intense pushback by the Bahamian people that followed, the government has tried everything in its power to change the narrative and argument concerning this piece of legislation. But the truth of the matter is, Madam President, a spade will always be a spade. And you talk about its size and in color can never change the fact. What you're presenting to us is the liberalization of work permit and little to do with commercial enterprise zones. But what is so sad, Madam President, is despite the cautioning from thousands across the country on both sides of the political divide, this administration continues to overlook the apparent flaws in the bill and is trying to shove this immigration bill down our throat. And it is an uncomfortable position that I will not accept. Madam President, while the government remains distracted by terminating government workers and implementing policies that will be more gracious to foreign workers, the people of Grand Bahama continue to suffer and remain in the need for economic intervention. Now, I know my colleague on the side opposite
Yeah.
would like to finish.
I deeply regret having to stop you in mid-flight and crave your indulgence. The president and the female senators have a pressing lunch engagement. It's an association of female parliamentarian lunch, I believe it is. National Women, in honor of National Women's Week. And they're scheduled for 12 o'clock. So with your consent? Thank you, sir. Madam President, I beg leave to move that the business of the Senate be suspended until 3 p.m. today, the 4th of December, 2017. If I may attain a seconder.
I rise to second.
It's been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate do now suspend. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The business of the House suspends to 3 p.m. today, December 4th, 2017.